Hello, I'm Bret and you're watching the defining moment for creating the culture of conscience. Our guest today is Dr. Tyler Hendricks. Dr. Hendricks is the president of the Unification Theological Seminary in New York. For 5 years, he served as president of the Holy Spirit Association for the Unification of World Christianity, formerly known as the Unification Church, which was founded by Reverend Dr. Myung. Dr. Hendricks has a Bachelor of Science degree in mathematics from the University of California at Davis, and he earned his master's and PhD degrees in American Church History from Vanderbilt University Graduate School of Religion in Nashville, Tennessee. Additionally, he holds a diploma in religious education from the Unification Theological Seminary. Tyler was born in California, and he currently lives in New York. He and his wife, Myung, from Korea, have 5 children and 1 grandchild. Dr. Tyler Hendricks, welcome back to the defining moment. It's really a privilege for me to welcome you back here to our show today.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Bret.
Thanks for coming. Our topic today is Reverend Dr. Moon the second coming of Christ? What was Reverend Moon's role in ending world communism?
Reverend Moon was considered by communists to be one of their arch enemies for many years. He published books, or he commissioned people to write books exposing not just the evils of communism in practice, but the flaws in communist theory. He realized, democracy, everything's got its problems. Communism is, of course, is the worst, but really, the argument against communism is the philosophical mistakes, the serious mistakes of Marxist economics and political views and interpretation of history, interpretation of reality. That's where he attacked, or that's where he pinpointed. And his position was not destroy communism, but go beyond communism, because he gave them credit where credit was due, that they, in many ways, were more effective than Christianity at addressing the ills of this world. So he didn't just say, let's destroy communism. Let's address their position. Let's connect to their ideals. Communists did have ideals of world peace and so forth. Let's acknowledge that. But let's, go beyond that, go over to a next step in history. So he convened many meetings, rallies, on the ground in college campuses, in Japan especially, also in Korea, and in America, and in Europe. A lot of head-on confrontation with communist youth groups. So on the college campuses, Unification young people proved to be the most effective at neutralizing the communist youth groups, because they would challenge them to debates, and they could defeat them in debates. And the key point, the most important point in the ideological struggle, was the issue of atheism. The communism denies God, denies the spiritual foundation of human existence, and is totally materialistic. This was really the core of Father Moon's rejection of communism, was that is it a God-denying theology. And he said, in history, any regime that is against God always fails. So he gave an amazing prophecy in 1971, I believe it was, or 72, which in a recorded speech in France, that communism would start to decline in 1977, and then by 1987 it would basically be dead. And this was borne out by history. In 1984, he convened a conference among the Professors World Peace Academy. He asked them to do a conference on the end of communism. And the leaders of that organization objected. They said, the end of communism, it's not going to end in our lifetimes. It's here to stay. But he said, no, I want you to do that conference, to invite speakers who will talk about the end of communism, because it's not going to last much longer. And all of those professors who objected had to eat their words, because within a few years the Berlin Wall had crumbled. Now, Reverend Moon invested incredibly because there was such a mentality in America that communism was this formidable, irresistible force that was probably going to take over the whole world, or at least be around for a long time as a so-called superpower. And in the Washington Times that Reverend Moon founded, he supported truthful, objective journalism about communism, about the atrocities, about the gulags, and this led to policy shifts in the White House, especially under Reagan. He strongly supported the strategy of the SDI, of the missile shield, that eventually convinced the Russian leadership that all of their nuclear weapons were not going to be effective. He sent reporters. One of his very deft strategies was to send reporters into do fact-finding tours in the Soviet Union, get media people in there to meet media people in Russia, and see firsthand what was going on in that country.
Well, what would have happened to Christianity and, in fact, all of the faiths of the world had the communists succeeded in their goal to dominate the entire world?
Communism is a satanic spirit that wants to destroy religion, and that was their practice. And at best, you'd have state churches, controlled by the party, as a step toward totally destroying religious life, which is impossible.
And what happened?
So what happened
to Christians in countries that became communist?
Well, they were all driven underground or driven into prisons if they wouldn't recant their faith, as far as I understand. Or Christians or people of any faith. So Father Moon believes religion is really the most important facet of human society, spiritual life, religion. So he didn't, hate communists. He didn't hate Russian people at all. It's just that their ideology was false. They were suffering under a false ideology. But we were building relationships with friends in Russia. And on that foundation, in 1990, he convened a World Media Conference in Moscow and was able to personally meet Mikhail Gorbachev. The Moons became friends with the Gorbachevs. Actually, Raisa Gorbachev, a few years later, came to Korea and was, part of some conferencing and cultural activities there. I think they just hit it off well, just on a personal level. And that's really, really important. So as soon as the wall came down with perestroika and glasnost, Reverend Moon was guiding Gorbachev, first of all, to liberalize, to allow all religions, to bring God back into Russia, and to allow religious life to flourish. That's the main foundation. And to educate your young people. So actually thousands and thousands of young Russians were educated in divine principle and Christianity, the Bible, and the ideals of true families, and which has a great positive effect. And they were brought to America, and they toured Washington and New York at the expense of Reverend Moon and this movement. They went to the United Nations. They went to the Congress. They saw what America was really like. No strings attached. Went back to Russia. And those people are building what hopefully will become a successful democratic regime sooner or later within Russia.
Okay, and how do you relate Reverend Moon's role in the end of communism with him being the second coming of Christ? What's the relationship there?
The relationship is that God has work to do on the earth, not just in heaven. God's kingdom as Jesus prayed, God's will should be done on earth as in heaven. We're talking about a transformation of this world into an ideal world, an ideal society, just like communists want and all people of goodwill want. It's not that this world will be destroyed and we're all going to be in some other galaxy or something like that. So there's very tangible, practical problems that humankind has to deal with. And the most serious one of the 20th century was communism, which controlled something like 2/3 of the world's population or had very strong influence over, in a very brutal, dictatorial, atheistic, materialistic, and impoverished
regime. So is it
regime.
because he's such a firm believer in democracy? Is that what motivated him?
He says no. He says that neither democracy nor communism are the answer. It's something that is much more fundamental, rooted in God, rooted in the family. That when we have an order of love in the world, based in God's living presence within families, within communities, that he looks at this as a family-centered world. The world will be one family. And in families you don't have elections, you don't have political parties. Things work out more with a human heart, through human relationships, through authentic human relationships, through elders and youngers relating in proper ways, through parents and children, grandparents, a 3-generation family. He says the 3-generation family is the model for the ideal nation. What that exactly means, I'm not really sure. I have some intuitions about it. I personally feel that political parties are important, that elections are important, and I don't see him taking any concrete steps to change that. In fact, he's encouraging people to run for political office and use the ballot box. Communism in some ways is a very efficient system. It's the Soviets are like a federal system of representational ownership and government from the local level, with factories and the your economic base going up to national level and so forth, in a very smooth and orderly society. But without God, it just can't work. Without salvation, it can't work. Without spiritual life, it just can't work. So Reverend Moon has said that if we have God, if we have the true spiritual life, if we have true family life, then this system of representational government, in a federal structure, is fine. It'll work just fine. In a way, communist system is not so different from Western democracy, except that they don't have the political parties. So the elections, there's sort of a presumption that there's going to be a total consensus about who should be, that somehow this consensus of who will be our representatives will emerge without elections, and hence without the thorough debate that political parties create. And also there's the state control, state ownership of property, and no private property, which totally doesn't work.
What are some of the most significant works that Reverend and Mrs. Moon have done to create the foundation for the kingdom of heaven on earth?
They've created many organizations that are dedicated for world peace, that are bringing people together beyond race, nation, and religion. That's extremely... I don't see the Pope doing that. I don't see the Dalai Lama doing that. I don't see the UN doing that. I think it's unparalleled, the investment they've made in creating environments in which young people and everyone, leaders of society, can mingle, give and take, centered on the highest of ideals of world peace and true love and family values, and mix and mingle. Africans.
Now, you are very privy to those accomplishments, but I think to the average person, most of that happens under the radar screen.
Yeah. Well, I think the media is not very interested in it.
And why is that?
Well, as a lay person, I'd say it's not sexy. It doesn't sell papers. It's not sensational. It's it doesn't fit with the mainstream media's storyline on Reverend Moon. That would be my first glance response. So that's a major accomplishment of theirs. They have invested in scientific and economic developments that, for the sake of the future of the world, especially in the development of the ocean, responsible oceanic development for the sake of feeding the world in the future. They're investing now more in environmental concerns. They are investing in education, in schools, in character education, developing curricula in many languages. They're investing in AIDS, education, in family values education. They are teaching, but at the core of it all is religious teaching, is spiritual teaching to help people find God and to help people have true families and become people who can really make a difference in the world.
Okay, very clear. Thank you. Why do you believe that so many mainstream Christians have rejected outright the possibility that Reverend Moon could be the Lord of the Second Coming?
I think the topic of the Second Coming is a mystery. And it's a mysterium tremendum. It's frightening. And it's not clear in the Bible. And most Christians, if you probably, ask them what they think about the Second Coming, they'll think, well, Jesus is coming in the clouds, right? That's what Revelation talks about. But if you scratch a little deeper and ask them, well, do you believe that kind of thing could really happen? You'll find that this belief is kind of, they can't integrate it with life, present reality, or with the rest of how they look at life. There's a real disconnect there. But it's such a strong image and faith that they don't necessarily, if they're going to remain a Christian, they're not going to just eliminate it because they want to believe in the second coming. Jesus said he would come again. But if he's not coming like that, floating in the clouds, then how would he come? Well, he would come like he came 2,000 years ago, as a man in a suit, or jeans, or he's going to...
Through the birth of a woman, basically.
Through a woman. And that is just opens up too many cans of worms for most people to deal with.
So you're saying that they probably reject the very concept of a second coming on the earth more so than necessarily rejecting Reverend Moon as
yes.
the personification of that.
I think it's lazy thinking.
Mm.
You know how the year 2000 came and went, right? Did we hear any Christians saying, wait a minute, 2,000 years since Christ came, he didn't come? There was a lot of tumult in the Christian world, in Christendom, in the year 1000, because there were people even wrote, I'm Christ, and he didn't come. But I didn't hear many Christians saying, hey, he didn't come on the clouds. Gee, that would have been a real great time for him to come. I thought he was going to come and descend into the second millennium, and he's supposed to come on the clouds, but gee, he didn't. Nobody kind of pointed that out.
And why do you believe that the year 2000 is so significant?
If you go back from the time of Christ, according to the biblical reckoning of time, you go back to Abraham, which is the seed the root of Jesse.
Father of faith.
Yeah, the father of faith was Abraham. And Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are the foundation of the work of God in history. I mean, Noah and Adam, and then 2,000 years later, the time was full, Jesus came. 2,000 years after that, well, I think a lot of Christians thought that he should come, maybe in 1950 or 60 or 1970, but as the time passed, he didn't come. People sort of don't they don't feel accountable to that sort of belief. So I don't hear much eschatology. I don't hear much talk about the second coming now. Remember, we had the late great planet Earth in the 70s. We had these very popular books in the 90s about the people getting removed by the rapture. But you don't hear about that so much anymore. Mm-hmm. So I think Christians just tend to draw a blank when they talk about the second coming. They don't know what to, and a lot of them know, well, Reverend Moon says he's the second coming. And, we, back in 30, 40, 30, 20 years ago, we did our best to debunk him and throw him in prison and reject him, but he's still out there. He's still talking about humankind becoming a world of peace and the reign of God and God's kingship, and he's still blessing people, and he's still saying he's the Messiah, and we just can't put him out.
So the scripture from Jesus that says, test all things concerning a second coming, that doesn't occur to Christians that they should investigate more deeply whether or not that could be happening through Reverend Moon.
I think it's a challenging thing to do that. I think they're afraid of what they would find. But also, Reverend Moon isn't necessarily an easy man to digest. And neither was Jesus. But I look at Jesus. Who in Jesus' society believed he was the Messiah? Nobody. Quite the opposite. They thought he was a blasphemer, a wine bibber, hung around with prostitutes and fishermen. He had a pretty bad reputation.
Very unlikely candidate.
Very unlikely candidate. If anything, he was a false Messiah. He was crucified as a blasphemer, as a threat, as an ungodly man. So Messiahs aren't your kind of garden variety nice preachers. Billy Graham or your Paul Cho or something like that. Messiahs rock the boat. They make everybody feel uncomfortable. They disturb people.
So we tend to lose that perspective if we're just following the traditional Christian teaching.
Yeah.
That maybe the candidate for the Lord of Second Advent would be the person that is the least likely.
Right.
That doesn't occur to people.
Right.
That possibility doesn't occur to people.
Right. So all the things they say is, but what I wanted to say was that, these perceptions of Jesus were not unfounded. Mm. He was a radical man. Yeah. He was a troublemaker.
Yeah.
He was deviant, you might say. Mm. Those Pharisees, those Sadducees were very good people.
And he didn't fulfill the expectations that they had for how do you say, a mighty warrior who would liberate them.
Right, or whatever they expected. Mm-hmm. But Jesus really was an unusual man. Mm-hmm. And Reverend Moon is too. Mm. And Jesus really did things that caused people to think he was unethical. Mm. He was arrogant. Mm. He was authoritarian. He was...
There was a lot of questionable happenings in his family background.
Yes.
Well.
He was an illegitimate child. Mm-hmm. And there was basis for that. Even though he was all those strange things, he was the Messiah. It means God can work through Balaam's ass. God can work in mysterious ways. Reverend Moon too. So people could say, well, look at his family. You know, his kids have problems. It's not, what kind of ideal family is that? I remember Jerry Falwell in one speech in a blessing event proudly talked about how his 3 sons were all happily married and they're all good Christians and they all have nice jobs and nice families. And everyone knew, well, you know, Reverend Moon has a lot of struggles, a lot of challenges. I mean, in his life, in his family. Well, is Jerry Falwell the Messiah? You know, it is. Jesus had a lot of struggles, a lot of problems. I mean, the whole world's against him, and he's supposed to be the Savior. The whole world's against Reverend Moon, and so, just like the Pharisees, Sadducees, typical people of Jesus' time, looking at him, well, here's what the Messiah is supposed to do. Well, let's click. No, nah. He gets, out of 100, he gets a 3.5. You know, people look at Reverend Moon too. Well, I don't know.
And a lot of it's just based on plain ignorance. They haven't done the homework to actually investigate what he really is about.
Yeah, they come at him from a position of disbelief, of suspicion. So many people say that. I mean, and why not? Sure. I mean, I'd be suspicious if somebody walked up to me and said, "I'm the Messiah." I'm going to go, "Yeah, right." You know,
it's a knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah, and you know, so Father Moon doesn't blame people. He doesn't. Jesus didn't. Jesus forgave them. Father Moon is totally forgiving, loving. But he's not going to change who he is. That's one of the greatest testimonies. His message for 60 years is the same message. He's on message. He doesn't change.
Okay.
People sooner or later are going to make up their minds that he's clear.
Okay, very good. On that note, Dr. Tyler Hendricks, I want to thank you so much for having been our guest today on The Defining Moment. It's been very interesting, fascinating, in fact, to hear you share everything you shared. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bret. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you. You've been watching The Defining Moment for Creating the Culture of Conscience. You can find us on the internet at www.definingmoment.tv. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.